There comes a moment in every life when the silence becomes heavier than the words left unspoken. A moment when the mirror no longer reflects who you truly are, but instead reveals the version of yourself you carefully stitched together to make everyone else comfortable. You lower your voice so others won't feel challenged. You hide your brilliance so no one feels overshadowed. You swallow your dreams because they seem too large for the rooms you've been invited into. Day after day, piece by piece, you surrender fragments of yourself until the stranger looking back at you wears your face but carries someone else's permission. But tell me this, who taught you that your light was too bright? Who whispered that your confidence was arrogance, that your ambition was selfishness, that your truth needed editing before it deserved to be heard? Those lessons did not come from the deepest part of your soul. They were handed to you by a world that often mistakes comfort for justice and conformity for peace. Yet comfort built upon someone else's disappearance is never peace. It is simply another name for quiet loss. There is something sacred about taking up the space you were born to occupy. Not because you seek attention, but because existence itself is not a privilege granted by the approval of others. It is your inheritance. Every time you make yourself smaller to fit into someone else's expectations, you deny not only your own humanity, but also the possibility that your courage might awaken someone else's. The world has never been transformed by people who learned how to disappear. It has always been changed by those who dared to remain visible. Even when visibility came with a cost, perhaps you have mistaken acceptance for belonging. They are not the same. Acceptance often asks you to negotiate pieces of your identity. Belonging asks nothing of you except honesty. One requires performance, the other welcomes presence. And there is no greater exhaustion than spending years performing a version of yourself that was never meant to survive. Today is not an invitation to become louder than everyone else. It is an invitation to stop whispering when your spirit was born with the strength of a full voice. It is a reminder that you do not owe the world a diminished version of your gifts simply because someone else has chosen to fear their own. Your existence is not an inconvenience. Your dreams are not too much. Your truth is not excessive. You were never created to fold yourself into smaller and smaller pieces until you became easy to ignore. So as we begin this journey together, I invite you to ask one question that may change everything. What kind of life could you build if you stopped apologizing for the space your soul naturally occupies? Because the day you stop shrinking is the day your real life finally has enough room to begin. From the time we are young, many of us are taught that being liked is more important than being honest with ourselves. We learn to smile when we are hurting, to agree when our hearts are filled with questions, and to hide our strength so no one mistakes our confidence for pride. At first, these adjustments seem harmless. They feel like small sacrifices made in the name of peace, love, or acceptance. But the danger of becoming smaller never announces itself with a loud warning. It arrives quietly. It settles into your habits. It becomes the invisible rule that shapes every decision you make until you can no longer remember who you were before you began editing yourself for the comfort of others. Every time you silence an idea because you fear it may intimidate someone, you lose more than a conversation. You lose another opportunity to meet your own potential. Every dream postponed to avoid making others uncomfortable becomes another brick in the wall, separating you from your authentic life. You convince yourself that you are being kind, considerate, or humble, yet beneath those noble words often hides a quieter truth. You have begun measuring your worth by the approval of people who benefit most from your hesitation. There is an invisible price attached to every piece of yourself you abandon. It is paid not in dollars, but in confidence, creativity, joy, and peace. The more you shrink, the more exhausted you become, because pretending requires far more energy than authenticity. You wake each morning carrying the weight of a version of yourself that was carefully designed to fit into someone else's expectations. You laugh at jokes that diminish your values. You apologize for talents you worked years to develop. You hesitate before speaking, wondering whether your truth will make the room uncomfortable. Slowly, you become a guest inside your own life instead of its author. What makes this cycle especially painful is that it rarely earns the reward you imagined. The people who expect you to become smaller are seldom satisfied. Once they become accustomed to your silence, they ask for even more of it. Once they see you willing to abandon your boundaries, they expect unlimited access to your time, your energy, and your emotional strength. Shrinking does not create respect. It creates expectation. It teaches others that your comfort is always negotiable, while theirs remains sacred. Meanwhile, the parts of you that were meant to flourish begin waiting in the shadows. Your curiosity waits. Your ambition waits. Your laughter waits. Your courage waits. They remain patient because they know they belong to you, but they cannot bloom inside a life built around constant permission. A flower does not apologize for taking up space in the garden. A river does not narrow itself because someone fears its depth. Nature understands a lesson humanity often forgets. Growth is not an offense. Expansion is not arrogance. Existing fully is not an act of rebellion. The greatest tragedy is not that the world sometimes misunderstands you. The greatest tragedy is reaching the end of your journey only to realize you spent decades living according to fears that were never truly your own. Carrying expectations you never agreed to, and becoming smaller for people who had already forgotten the sacrifices you made. From the time we are young, many of us are taught that being liked is more important than being honest with ourselves. We learn to smile when we are hurting, to agree when our hearts are filled with questions, and to hide our strengths so no one mistakes our confidence for pride. At first, these adjustments seem harmless. They feel like small sacrifices made in the name of peace, love, or acceptance. But the danger of becoming smaller never announces itself with a loud warning. It arrives quietly. It settles into your habits. It becomes the invisible rule that shapes every decision you make until you can no longer remember who you were before you began editing yourself for the comfort of others. Every time you silence an idea because you fear it may intimidate someone, you lose more than a conversation. You lose another opportunity to meet your own potential. Every dream postponed to avoid making others uncomfortable becomes another brick in the wall, separating you from your authentic life. You convince yourself that you are being kind, considerate, or humble, yet beneath those noble words often hides a quieter truth. You have begun measuring your worth by the approval of people who benefit most from your hesitation. There is an invisible price attached to every piece of yourself you abandon. It is paid not in dollars, but in confidence, creativity, joy, and peace. The more you shrink, the more exhausted you become, because pretending requires far more energy than authenticity. You wake each morning carrying the weight of a version of yourself that was carefully designed to fit into someone else's expectations. You laugh at jokes that diminish your values. You apologize for talents you worked years to develop. You hesitate before speaking, wondering whether your truth will make the room uncomfortable. Slowly, you become a guest inside your own life instead of its author. What makes this cycle especially painful is that it rarely earns the reward you imagined. The people who expect you to become smaller are seldom satisfied. Once they become accustomed to your silence, they ask for even more of it. Once they see you willing to abandon your boundaries, they expect unlimited access to your time, your energy, and your emotional strength. Shrinking does not create respect. It creates expectation. It teaches others that your comfort is always negotiable while theirs remains sacred. Meanwhile, the parts of you that were meant to flourish begin waiting in the shadows. Your curiosity waits. Your ambition waits. Your laughter waits. Your courage waits. They remain patient because they know they belong to you. But they cannot bloom inside a life built around constant permission. A flower does not apologize for taking up space in the garden. A river does not narrow itself because someone fears its depth. Nature understands a lesson humanity often forgets. Growth is not an offense. Expansion is not arrogance. Existing fully is not an act of rebellion. The greatest tragedy is not that the world sometimes misunderstands you. The greatest tragedy is reaching the end of your journey only to realize you spent decades living according to fears that were never truly your own, carrying expectations you never agreed to, and becoming smaller for people who had already forgotten the sacrifices you made. Your presence is not something that requires an apology. You were not born to ask permission before entering a room, sharing an idea, or living a life that reflects the fullness of who you are. Yet so many people move through the world as though their existence is a burden to others. They apologize before speaking, second-guess their opinions, and carry themselves as if taking up space is an offense rather than a birthright. Somewhere along the way, they accepted the quiet lie that they must earn the right to be seen, heard, and valued. But no human being should have to diminish their spirit simply to make others feel more secure. There is a difference between humility and self-erasure. Humility allows you to recognize that every person has worth, including yourself. Self-erasure, however, convinces you that everyone else's comfort matters more than your own truth. It teaches you to shrink your laughter because it is too loud. Soften your intelligence because it makes someone uncomfortable, and hide your accomplishments because they might provoke envy. Over time, these small compromises become habits. You no longer notice how often you interrupt yourself before anyone else has the chance to. You become both the prisoner and the guard, limiting your own voice long before the world ever asks you to. The tragedy is not that people may misunderstand your confidence. The tragedy is believing their misunderstanding should determine your identity. Confidence is often mistaken for arrogance by those who have been taught that quiet suffering is the highest form of virtue. But standing firmly in your own worth does not require stepping on another person's dignity. A candle does not steal light from another candle by burning brightly. It simply fulfills its purpose. In the same way, your presence is not a threat simply because it is genuine, visible, and unapologetic. Many people spend years trying to become less noticeable. They avoid opportunities because success might attract criticism. They remain silent in meetings despite having valuable ideas. They settle for relationships where they are tolerated instead of celebrated. They become experts at making themselves invisible, believing invisibility will protect them from rejection. Yet invisibility has its own cost. You cannot be fully rejected if no one truly knows you, but neither can you be deeply loved, respected, or understood. Safety purchased through self-concealment is one of the loneliest bargains a person can make. The world often benefits from people who doubt themselves. A person who constantly apologizes is easier to control. A person who questions their own value is less likely to demand fairness. Someone who believes they are too much will willingly settle for less than they deserve. That is why reclaiming your presence is such a powerful act. It is not an act of rebellion against others. It is an act of loyalty to yourself. It is deciding that your voice deserves to be heard without unnecessary apologies. Your ideas deserve consideration without shame, and your dreams deserve pursuit without constant justification. When you stop treating your existence as an inconvenience, something remarkable begins to happen. You walk differently because your steps are no longer weighed down by invisible guilt. You speak with greater clarity because your words are no longer filtered through fear. You make decisions based on conviction rather than approval. The people who value authenticity will recognize the difference immediately, while those who depended on your uncertainty may become uncomfortable. Their discomfort is not evidence that you have become difficult. It is often evidence that you have stopped making yourself smaller to fit inside the limits they imagined for you, and instead chosen to honor the undeniable truth that your presence has always been worthy of its rightful place in the world, without apology or permission from anyone else who could never define your value. The world often celebrates individuality in words, but quietly rewards conformity in practice. From childhood, people are encouraged to dream without limits, yet they are frequently criticized the moment those dreams become visible. Society applauds originality until originality challenges familiar expectations. It praises courage until courage refuses to follow the crowd. This contradiction convinces many people that acceptance depends on becoming predictable, agreeable, and easy to understand. But the greatest achievements, the deepest relationships, and the most meaningful lives have never been built upon imitation. They have always been born from the courage to remain authentic, even when authenticity feels lonely, There is a profound difference between fitting in and belonging. Fitting in requires you to study the room, identify what others expect, and reshape yourself accordingly. Belonging asks only that you arrive as you are. One demands performance. The other welcomes truth. Yet countless people spend years chasing the first while starving for the second. They become experts at reading expectations, adjusting personalities, and hiding the parts of themselves that seem inconvenient. Eventually, they receive the approval they were seeking, only to discover that the approval belongs to a version of themselves they invented, rather than the person they truly are. Authenticity is not about refusing to grow or rejecting wisdom from others. It is about ensuring that your growth reflects your own values instead of someone else's fears. A tree does not compare its branches to the flowers growing beside it. It grows according to its own design, reaching toward the light in a way that only it can. Human beings often forget this simple truth. We compare our journeys, silence our instincts, and abandon our gifts because they do not resemble the paths of those around us. But comparison has never created greatness. It only creates distance between who you are and who you believe you should become. Many people believe that authenticity comes with too high a price. They fear rejection, criticism, misunderstanding, or isolation. Those fears are understandable, but hiding your true self carries a far greater cost. Every time you deny your voice, suppress your creativity, or ignore your convictions, you teach yourself that your identity is negotiable. You begin making decisions based not on purpose but on popularity. Slowly, your confidence fades because confidence cannot survive in a life built upon constant disguise. It grows only where honesty is allowed to breathe. Ironically, the qualities that make people unforgettable are rarely the ones they borrowed from others. They are remembered for their distinct perspective, their unwavering values, their unique way of speaking, creating, loving, and leading. The world does not truly reward copies. Copies may receive temporary approval because they feel familiar, but they seldom leave a lasting impact. Authentic people, on the other hand, may face resistance at first because they challenge expectations, yet over time they earn something far more valuable than applause. They earn trust. Others know exactly where they stand because there is no performance to decode, no mask to interpret, and no hidden version waiting behind polite appearances. Living authentically also gives silent permission for others to do the same. When one person chooses honesty over performance, courage over approval, and purpose over popularity, they create space for those around them to release their own disguises. Authenticity spreads not through speeches, but through example. It reminds people that they do not have to trade their identity for acceptance or exchange their truth for temporary comfort. The life that leaves the deepest mark is never the one spent chasing applause from every audience, but the one built with the quiet confidence to remain unmistakably yourself in a world that constantly invites you to become someone else. There comes a quiet moment in every person's life when they realize they have been waiting for permission that was never theirs to seek. Permission to speak honestly, permission to dream boldly, permission to take up space without guilt, permission to choose a different path from the one everyone else expected. For years, many people unknowingly live as though an invisible committee must approve every important decision they make. They look to family, friends, co-workers, or society before looking inward, hoping someone else will confirm that they are worthy of pursuing the life they desire. Yet the greatest prison is not built with walls. It is built from the belief that your existence must always be validated by someone outside yourself. This habit rarely begins in adulthood. It often starts in childhood, when approval becomes closely tied to love, safety, and acceptance. You are praised when you behave in expected ways and corrected when you express parts of yourself that seem inconvenient. Slowly, your mind begins connecting acceptance with obedience. You become skilled at reading people's reactions, adjusting your behavior, and avoiding anything that might invite disappointment. Over time, this instinct grows so deeply rooted that you no longer notice how often you silence your own desires before anyone else has a chance to question them. Living this way creates an exhausting cycle. Every opportunity becomes a negotiation with imagined opinions. Before making a decision, you ask yourself how others will respond instead of asking whether the choice aligns with your values. You hesitate before sharing your ideas because you anticipate criticism that has not even occurred. You delay important dreams because the timing may not satisfy everyone around you. Eventually, you stop trusting your own judgment, believing that someone else's certainty must always outweigh your own intuition. But there is a remarkable difference between seeking wisdom and seeking permission. Wisdom allows you to learn from others while remaining responsible for your own life. Permission, however, places your future into someone else's hands. Wisdom expands your perspective. Permission shrinks your independence. One strengthens your voice. The other slowly replaces it with echoes of other people's expectations. A mature life is not one where you ignore every opinion, but one where your deepest decisions are guided by conviction rather than fear of disapproval. Breaking this habit requires more than a single act of courage. It demands a daily commitment to remembering that your life belongs to you. It means accepting that every meaningful choice carries the possibility of misunderstanding. Some people will question your direction because it exposes the limits they placed on themselves. Others may resist your growth because they became comfortable with the version of you that always asked for approval. Their reactions are not always reflections of your decisions. Often, they reveal their own relationship with change, uncertainty, and control. There is quiet power in making a decision simply because it reflects who you are. Not because it guarantees applause, but because it allows you to live without the constant burden of pretending. Every time you choose honesty over performance, your confidence grows a little stronger. Every time you trust your own judgment, you rebuild a relationship with yourself that years of doubt may have weakened. Slowly, the need for external permission begins to fade, replaced by something far more enduring, a steady inner confidence that no longer waits for someone else to declare you ready, worthy, capable, or deserving before you step forward into the life that has been calling your name all along, with the certainty that your purpose was never meant to be delayed by the hesitation or approval of anyone else who could never fully understand the path only you were created to walk. There is a quiet strength that emerges when you stop dimming your light for the comfort of others. It is not loud, boastful, or demanding. It does not seek to prove its worth through endless arguments or constant validation. Instead, it stands with calm certainty, understanding that a life lived honestly will inevitably make some people uncomfortable. Not because honesty is cruel, but because authenticity has a way of exposing the masks that fear encourages others to wear. Standing fully in your own light means accepting this reality without allowing it to determine the size of your spirit. Many people spend years believing that confidence must come with the approval of those around them. They think they will finally feel free once everyone understands their choices, supports their dreams, or celebrates their success. But that day rarely arrives. There will always be someone who questions your direction, misunderstands your intentions, or feels threatened by your growth. If your confidence depends on universal acceptance, it will always remain fragile. True confidence is born the moment you realize that agreement is not a requirement for living truthfully. Your purpose does not become less meaningful simply because someone else cannot see it. Fear has an extraordinary ability to disguise itself as wisdom. It whispers that now is not the right time, that you should wait until you are more experienced, more accepted, more certain, or more prepared. It encourages hesitation while calling it responsibility. It convinces you to stay hidden while calling it humility. Yet many of the greatest opportunities in life are missed, not because people lack talent, but because they allow fear to become the editor of every possibility. They postpone the conversation that could change their future. They abandon the dream before it has a chance to grow. They choose the familiar over the meaningful because uncertainty feels too expensive. Standing in your own light does not mean pretending to be fearless. Courage has never required the absence of fear. Courage simply refuses to let fear make the final decision. Every meaningful step forward is accompanied by uncertainty. Every authentic life includes moments of doubt. The difference is that people who live with purpose acknowledge those feelings without surrendering to them. They understand that discomfort is often evidence of growth rather than a signal to retreat. They know that the path toward fulfillment is rarely smooth, but it is always more rewarding than the comfort of constant self-denial. There is also wisdom in recognizing that not everyone is meant to understand your journey. Some people only knew the version of you that sought approval, avoided conflict, and remained comfortably predictable. When you begin honoring your values without apology, those relationships may change. Some will celebrate your transformation, while others may resist it because your courage reminds them of the risks they have avoided. Their reaction is not a measure of your worth. It is simply a reflection of where they are in their own story. You cannot carry both your future and everyone's expectations at the same time. Imagine living each day without asking whether your dreams are too ambitious, your voice too confident, or your presence too noticeable. Imagine making decisions rooted in conviction instead of fear, speaking with honesty instead of hesitation, and embracing opportunities without first shrinking to fit inside someone else's comfort. That is what it means to stand fully in your own light. It is choosing to honor the gifts, experiences, and purpose placed within you, knowing that your life was never intended to be lived from the shadows, but from a place of unwavering self-respect, where your existence becomes a quiet reminder that the brightest souls are not those who make themselves smaller to ease the fears of others, but those who shine with grace, courage, and integrity, despite every reason they were given to disappear.